Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the best and some slightly less best versions of Richard Strauss's tone poem, Don Quixote. Oh, wow. This is a biggie. It is, because Don Quixote is widely regarded as the greatest of all of Strauss's large tone poems, in particular because it's a theme and variations in structure. It has none of the dead spots that sometimes characterizes Strauss's other tone poems in his sort of bastard version of sonata form, where you've got to worry about like where the development is and what's going on at any given point. Here, he's simply doing a series of vignettes, character sketches, with wonderful solos for the cello, who represents Don Quixote, and the viola and tenor tuba that represents Sancho Panza, and the oboe is Dulcinea. I mean, it's beautifully structured and shaped and characterized with wonderful opportunities for just about everybody in the orchestra. And while it doesn't have a tam-tam, it does have a wind machine. Wow, baby, a wind machine that depicts the flight through the air. It's a fabulous moment. Actually, in that particular variation, you don't need to hear the wind machine as much as the horns. That's sort of how the tune, but it's just marvelous, absolutely marvelous. And there are a lot of great recordings. Now, there aren't as many as some of the other tone poems, like Don Juan or whatnot, because Don Quixote is a little bit more complicated to present. You need fantastic soloists, and quite often you want to have a virtuoso soloist in the cello, being for Don Quixote himself. This creates issues because the piece is not a cello concerto. It's a tone poem with a concertante cello part, which is extremely virtuosic, by the way, and definitely of concerto-like proportions, but still, it's a little bit tricky. Generally speaking, performances fall into two categories: those with hot-shot cello soloists, front and center, and those where the first desk players of the orchestra take the solo parts, which is what Strauss intended. And I have to be honest and say, I don't really have a preference. I mean, marginally, I like the ones without the hotshot soloists, because it's really good to hear, the orchestra's first desk soloists do their thing, and they know their colleagues, and maybe there's a little bit more intimate chamber-like interaction. But on the other hand, there are some cellists, and we'll see who they are, who have made quite a career as Don Quixote, doing the part, and who really know how to interact with the orchestra generally, too. So there are great performances in both categories, but it's worth pointing out that if you turn the thing into a cello concerto with just, a big-name soloist, it's not likely to do as well as some of the other versions that are more intimate or more collegial in their approach. And whoever's doing the approach, I guess, doesn't really matter as long as that's the approach. So let's talk about the various recordings. First, some historical stuff. We've got three sort of historical, quasi-historical recordings, beginning with Strauss himself here on Dutton. This is really very interesting because this is with the Berlin Opera Orchestra, the Berlin State Opera Orchestra, recorded in 1933. Which was sort of a big deal for the day. And you've got, Enrico Mainardi, cello. Is he the cello? Yes, solo cello. He's the only person who gets credit here. And it's a very good performance and very bad sound, as you might expect. And the problem with it is just that, as is usual with Strauss's own recordings of his works, he's not always interested in what he's doing. But this performance, I think, has value because of its unsentimental timing and approach to the death of Don Quixote. Some cellists just like to moon over that ending forever. And just as a function of comparison, just so we can be interested, Strauss takes 4 minutes and 23 seconds over the finale, the death of Don Quixote. And it's interesting to compare that to other versions and see where they turn out. I'm not saying that slower is necessarily worse. It isn't. It's always the case with tempo. It depends on phrasing and tension and. But when you're at the end of the work and the work is going to end quietly, as this does, it's a good indicator of where you're going. So Strauss himself took 4 minutes and 23 seconds. If it was 4 minutes and 33 seconds, we'd be in John Cage territory. But in any case, it was probably its own side of a 78. 4 minutes and 23 seconds. So let's keep it in mind and see where we wind up. Next, we have Toscanini, whose Death and Transfiguration was absolutely, sort of the reference recording. It was just unbelievable. His Don Quixote, naturally, when you've got other people involved and it's a big 40-minute work, it's not going to be quite so intense because you don't have the continuity that you had in Death and Transfiguration, but it's still a very, very fine version. It's a little bit on the quick side, but not ridiculously so. You've got Frank Miller, Carlton Cooley, and Daniel Guillet, violin. So you've got NBC Symphony Orchestra soloists, which I like because they're wonderful soloists. And let's see how long he takes for the Death of the Don. Let's take 5 minutes and 9 seconds. Look at that. He's a little bit slower than Strauss himself. This goes to tell you that Strauss himself might have been just a little bit too much on the unsentimental side, dismissive of the whole thing, which is typical of Strauss's own performances, because Toscanini was not one to meander. And that's an interesting fact in and of itself. But it's a splendid performance on RCA. And if you're interested in historical recordings of the work, that's a very good one to get. So is this one with, what's his name? Clemens Krauss. There we go. Clemens Krauss, who was a major Strauss collaborator. And I don't mean that in the Nazi sense. I mean that in the artistic sense. Let's see. And this is the first that has hotshot solo cellist, Pierre Fournier, who was a wonderful cellist. And the other hotshot cellist was also French, Paul Tortelier. I mean, they did Don Quixote a lot. Lots and lots and lots. And they were specialists in this work. It was their thing. And they did it superbly well. So let's take a look and see how long it takes the Don to die. Here, 4 minutes and 56 seconds. Again, a little bit slower than Strauss himself. And again, Krauss being a fantastic Straussian, he's with the Vienna Phil there on Decca. You have to ask yourself, was Strauss being too flippant in the closing passages, or was he in a rush to get it over with, to get to that quiet ending? Quite possibly. Then we've got this one. Let's see. This one is with Zubi. Yeah, Zubin Mehta and the L.A. Phil. And also, once again, with soloists from the L.A. Phil, which is wonderful. Kurt Reher, cello, and Jan Hlinka, viola. And let's see, with Los Angeles Philharmonic. And the Don dies in 5 minutes and 3 seconds. So we're building a picture here of how long it takes the guy to kick off, right? 5 minutes is probably about right. Not Strauss's 4 minutes and 23 seconds. 5 minutes is okay. Like all of the Strauss tone poems in Mehta's cycle, it's splendid. It's very, very well done. This was, a series of recordings that really put Mehta on the map as a Strauss interpreter. His Alpine Symphony particularly was, widely considered to be like stunning back in the day. And it is. It's marvelous. So there's that one. Then we have this big box of Strauss tone poems and stuff, which is mostly Blomstedt recordings. But what we have here is Court Mazur with Heinrich Schiff. Now, I would listen to Heinrich Schiff play anything. Heinrich Schiff was fabulous. And he's got, let's see here. Yes, Heinrich Schiff with the Gewandhaus Orchestra. It's a lovely performance, actually. Mazur isn't always the most compelling conductor out there, but he's got wonderful soloists. He's got his hometown team orchestra, and the Don dies in 5 minutes and 23 seconds. That's pushing it. It's pushing it just a little bit. But, I see you sitting there saying, oh, goodness, what's 20 seconds? What does it matter? Well, it can. It can matter if you have, performers who are not alert to the necessity of keeping, the long line in place, maintaining tension, and keeping us awake. Heinrich Schiff, I have no problems with, because he always knows what he's doing. And it's a very lovely and not particularly well-known recording of Don Quixote. Next, we have a not-so-good Don Quixote. And it got lots of attention, like everything he did when it came out. Yo-Yo Ma, with Seiji Ozawa and the Boston Symphony. Now, Ozawa was not the most thrilling Strauss conductor out there. He tended to be a little bit lightweight, perhaps a little bit on the, lacking in oomph, in punch, in garishness even, a little vulgarity, And so his Strauss, he did that recording of Also Sprach Zarathustra, coupled to, Ein Heldenleben, that was on one CD. And it was an early digital recording, and it didn't get a lot of favorable press when it came out. It wasn't bad. But it just wasn't as interesting as it needed to be. And that's true of this too. Yo-Yo Ma is always a very pretty soloist, but he's not always the most interesting soloist. You can't fault his basic musicality, but what he sometimes lacks is simply personality. And Don Quixote has to have a big personality. I mean, he's a clown. He's a crazy person. But one thing this disc did have, which is fabulous, is the Schoenberg Cello Concerto, which would have been the first time most people ever heard the work. The Schoenberg Cello Concerto is based on a Baroque work by, what was his name? Matthias Georg Mann. And it is wild, and absolutely wild. It's like 15 minutes long. It's not long at all. Yeah, it's 16 minutes. It's insanely difficult to perform. It's scored with complete disregard for anything that could be reasonably thought of as Baroque. It's got lots of percussion and harps and things. It's a crazy piece of music and oodles of fun. And this they do really well, because Ozawa was fabulous at 20th century music, contemporary music. Yo-Yo Ma sounds really interested. I don't know if we care how long it takes the Don to die here, or if they even tell us, but let's see if they do. No, they don't. There's no indication whatsoever. And all of Don Quixote is just on one track. Maybe that's symptomatic of a lack of concern. I don't know. But definitely not the best. But worth it for the Schoenberg, which is really funny, actually. So there you go. That's what happens. Now we get to, okay, Herbert von Karajan. He recorded Don Quixote at least 4 times. I think 4 times. 1, 2, 3. About 3 or 4 times. I don't know. There was the digital one, and then there was the not digital one, and there was the EMI one. So there's at least 3. And Don Quixote was supposed to be his favorite of all the Strauss tone poems. And that's saying quite a lot, because he was a major Strauss tone poem guy. And I think his performances are generally pretty terrific, but they're very different, actually. Usually Karajan's performances all sound the same. It doesn't matter when he did them. But I have 2 of them here, which is kind of fascinating. One has Rostropovich. Now, you may well imagine that the Rostropovich version is going to be Rostropovich front and center. And so it is. It's with Berlin Phil, and this one is on Warner. It was EMI. Then there is his more classic first version. It's on DG Originals with Pierre Fournier. Good old Pierre Fournier, the Don Quixote guy, or one of the Don Quixote guys. And with Giusto Capone, viola, as Sancho. And the performance itself is a little bit on the slower side. Interestingly, the Rostropovich is a little quicker, but only by 7 seconds or something. The difference is in the cellist. Rostropovich is always willing to pour out the tone. Oh my goodness, he just oozes all over the place. Again, no, here are the timings. And it takes the Don 5 minutes and 42 seconds to kick the bucket, which is a long time for him to expire. In the DG one here, let's see what we get. This is interesting. Here he is. He's dying. There he is. 5 minutes and 39 seconds. Well, that's interesting because this is actually the slightly slower performance by 10 seconds. But the Don dies more quickly. Still, he takes his time. He really takes his time. Remember Fournier was around for Clemens Krauss there, and he was 5 minutes and a couple seconds. So he's taken another half a minute to kick off here. And that's probably Karajan, the influence of Karajan. And, both cellists, of course, sustain it. But I think the Rostropovich is a little snoozy at the end. I do. However bold and hunky he may be in the rest of the work, when you're getting close to 6 minutes, that's pushing it. Remember, Strauss, 4 minutes, 23 seconds. In a passage that's only 4 minutes long, you're talking about a, 25% increase in length. And that's a push. So next, oh my goodness, here's one that most people don't know that well, but it really deserves to be, I think, given a little bit of love. It's Haitink and the Concertgebouw with wonderful soloists from the orchestra, Tibor de Machula, who was their principal cellist and who was just marvelous. And let's see, who's this? Klaus Boone, it looks like. Bone, viola. And when was this recorded? It was 1966, it looks like. Wow. This is usually not included in there. There was that Phillips now Decca Twofer of Strauss tone poems, and it had, a whole pile of them, but not Don Quixote. And then they did the Alpine Symphony, which was a separate thing too. But this sort of disappeared. It's on the Bernard Haitink edition, Dutch Masters, volume 48, volume 48 that Phillips issued way back when. And it's really sensitive, beautifully done with fabulous woodwinds because it's the Concertgebouw. And Haitink, who is, disappears into the work, which he usually does when he's, in good form. He keeps it going, and the orchestra and the soloists are just having a love fest. It's really lovely. So there you go. At least we've found a few that would not be in the normal list of Don Quixotes and Strauss tone poems by all the usual Strauss people. Then we've got Andre Previn with the Vienna Phil. Now, this is also with soloists from the Vienna Phil, which is why I like this performance also. Rainer Kuchel and Heinrich Kohli, viola. Rainer Kuchel is the violin. It's a cellist. Well, okay. Oh, no. Pardon me. It's Franz Bartolome is the cellist. There we go. I was looking at this going like, whoa, they got it wrong. No, there is a cellist from the Vienna Phil. And how long does it take the Don to die? 5 minutes and 19 seconds. Could it be that as time goes on, it's taking the Don longer and longer to kick the bucket? Maybe because they're slowing down? I don't know. It's an interesting observation. Let's see if it holds up. Probably it won't, but you never know. Beautiful performance, wonderfully well recorded, like everything in that Tellart series. And Previn was a sensitive Straussian. He really was. He wasn't always the most exciting, but he knew how the music went. I remember he gave a broadcast on PBS of Ein Heldenleben, where he gave an interview before the piece, and he was typically vaporous and Previn, like at the beginning. He's like, oh, I don't know how big the orchestra is. There's like lots of people and they do lots of things. And, well, it was Ein Heldenleben. Okay, so then we've got, good old Eugene Ormandy. Yeah, in Philadelphia. And this is with a wonderful cellist from the orchestra. Lorne Monroe is the cellist with Carlton Cooley, viola. Fantastic soloists. Absolutely first class. I don't know if we'll have timing. Oh, we do have timings. Thank goodness, because this is the Japanese Ormandy edition. And the finale is 5 minutes and 13 seconds. So, that's in there. That's sort of, par for the course. It's where we're going. Gorgeous, gorgeous playing. As usual with Ormandy in Philadelphia, he keeps the thing moving. He loves his soloists. He was the greatest accompanist that ever lived. It's a beautiful performance that does not also get much attention, which is a shame, because it's really first class. Absolutely first class. Next, Loren Mazel with the Vienna Philharmonic. These Loren Mazel Vienna Philharmonic Strauss recordings were pretty first class. They really were. A lot of you have mentioned them as we've gone through this series and talked about how good they are, and they are. They're absolutely wonderful. And I think that these are also with Vienna Phil people. Emmanuel Brabeck cello and Josef Starr viola. Why doesn't the tenor tuba guy ever get any attention? He's got to go do for Sancho Panza. It's so cute. It's adorable. It really deserves better. And the epilogue is 5 minutes and 33 seconds. On the slowish side, we're talking Karajan type tempos. Here we are. And, okay. It's still a terrific performance. Wonderfully, wonderfully shaped and phrased. Beautifully contrasted with the Vienna Phil. Very, very good form, as they are for Previn. And it helps some orchestras, I think, when their first desk players take the solo roles, because they don't want to embarrass them, unless they hate them, of course, in which case, sky's the limit. So there we go. Reiner. We got to talk about Reiner. I mean, Reiner was a fantastic Don Quixotean, and he's got Antonio Yanigro. Yeah, cello. I love Yanigro. He's wonderful, wonderful cellist, with Milton Previs viola and John Weicher violin. This is a deliberate performance, but as usual with Reiner, it's 43 minutes long total. Usually it takes about 41. Toscanini was 39. Don Quixote dies in 5 minutes and 54 seconds. So that is absolutely one of the slowest ones around. But Reiner is so precise, and he's so good at maintaining tension. And this, of course, blows my theory that things got slower as recordings got more recent, because this one is from the 1950s or 59. So we're not talking about yesterday. So there you go. There is no relationship between how long it takes the Don to die and the year that the recording was made. It all depends on the orchestra and the soloist. You've got Chicago playing like demons. It's just marvelous. Yeah, it's very interesting. I was talking just yesterday about Pierre Monteux's Franck D minor symphony with the Chicago Symphony, same year as this Don Quixote, 59. And it just goes to show what the major labels were doing with these great orchestras back in the day, making lots of recordings of all kinds of repertoire. And wow, Chicago was something special in 1959, for sure. One of the all-time great ones. Oh my goodness, this is fabulous. Finally, it was reissued beautifully. George Sell with Pierre Fournier. Yeah, of course, it's Pierre Fournier again. With Abraham Skurnik viola and Raphael Druyan, of course, violin. This is great. Sell was the orchestra is a giant chamber ensemble guy, and Don Juan is the orchestra is a giant chamber ensemble kind of piece. So this is an absolutely fabulous, fabulous performance, and it is absolutely in line with the historical rectitude that we spoke of previously. 5 minutes and 5 seconds for for Don Quixote. Pardon me, I keep saying Don Juan. Oh dear, Quixote. That's who it is. For Don Quixote to die. Just 5 minutes and 5 seconds, and of course, Sell knew Strauss well, and this is really a remarkable performance. First class. Absolutely first class. So there's that one. Let's stick it here in the pile, which is starting to bang up against Finster's cat stand here, which is unoccupied. She's having breakfast, in case you're interested. However, However, the best, the most remarkable Don Quixote, I got to get through this, Don Quixote is going to be, well, Rudolf Kemper. We have, however, but now we have, well, you just wait and see. This is the one in his big box, okay? The one in the big box. Now, the one in the big box of all the Strauss orchestral works, or major Strauss orchestral works, it's not all of them, with the Staatskapelle Dresden, which is absolutely fabulously marvelous, as we all know. It's the reference recording for the Strauss tone poems, and it's got, up there it is, here's Don Quixote. It takes him 5 minutes and 26 seconds to die, and it's with Paul Tortelier, who is also wonderful. He's the Pierre Fournier of Paul Torteliers. I mean, I always get them mixed up too, but fortunately they have very different names that don't begin with Don. So it saves me. It's Max Rostal, viola, 5 minutes and 26 seconds for the Don to die. And you've got just unbelievably transparent and beautiful playing from the Staatskapelle Dresden. However, we have a however choice, because while Kemper is absolutely the guy to go to, I think, for Don Quixote, because he catches the humor and the lightness and the flow of the piece so beautifully. He was so wonderful at that. He was an oboist. And I think he understood the orchestra and how to bring out the best in everybody. But there was an earlier Kemper recording on Warner. Well, actually, it's here on Testament with the Berlin Phil, with Tortelier again, and Giusto Capone, viola, Berlin Phil, Rudolf Kemper. Oh my goodness, it's marvelous. Absolutely marvelous. It's 41 minutes and 32 seconds long, which is ideal. And the Don dies in 5 minutes and 35 seconds. It's exactly the same, or just about exactly the same. Kind of remarkably consistent. What makes this one better? Oh, it's not really a lot better. It's marginally better. I just think because the Berlin Phil, this was in 1959, I guess. 1960 it was published. There was something about it. They were just one of those, every orchestra can be great day in, day out. But sometimes there are recordings that are just other. Everyone's on top of their game and they're just doing their best and everything just goes right. This is one of those. And it's one of those in a work where a lot can go wrong because Strauss is tricky. And he does not play himself. It doesn't play itself. He does not play himself. Yeah, he does. No, the music doesn't play itself. And it was one of those magical moments in the studio. And no matter how good the orchestra is or how great the competition is, there's no accounting for those moments when everything comes together. And it does here. So this is the choice. The Kemper Tortelier Berlin, as opposed to Staatskapelle Dresden. And so there you go, my friends. A big giant clump of Don Quixotes. Yeah, it's Quixote. I got that. So we'll wrap up with at least the right name for the piece. Like I said, there are quite a few others. You may have your own favorites. Certainly, you're free to suggest them and add them to the pile. Let us know, or let us all know what you're listening to when you want to hear Don Quixote. There we go. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.